Well, this was a little bit boneheaded of me, but I was a little bit late in starting the recording of the Zoom call that I did with Garrett Gunderson. So what I've done is I have included the full audio on this clip. Obviously, all you're going to see on YouTube is a bunch of squiggly lines. I also did start the recording so you can watch the interview. It's just going to be like 18 minutes into the conversation. So again, this is the full audio. You can also listen to this in podcast world, but I wanted to put this on YouTube as well. You're going to see the incomplete video that we did. I do recommend checking at least the first part of this out or listening to the audio podcast wherever you get your podcast. So anyway, that's what this is. And there you go. Hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another very special guest to introduce to you now. And this episode is so special that it deserves a special introduction, which I've taken from his latest book. Garrett Gunderson is a modern-day Renaissance man. Well, maybe. Garrett is an Inc. 500 founder of a financial firm and an amateur barista, a rookie fly fisherman, and a Wall Street Journal #1 best-selling author. By the way, those books include, but are not limited to, Killing Sacred Cows, Disrupting Sacred Cows, and Money Unmasked, which was released on October 3rd, 2023. Garrett is a public speaker who's delivered hundreds of keynotes and a mediocre guitar player at home. A bow hunter, Traeger grill semi-pro, wow, former CrossFitter, and a whiskey sommelier, which is real and just as douchey as it sounds. Maybe the best way to get to know Garrett is from a few notes from his wife, Carrie. Garrett is a man who can only drink tequila under supervision, a man who will stop at nothing to provide his wife food if she gets hangry. Self-preservation, really. A dad who is totally cool with letting his kids go anywhere with him in any costume they had on. A man who can't fix a toilet, but can help you become financially independent so you can hire someone else to do it for you. A man who supports his wife meditation, even if she is just sleeping. A father who loves and adores his sons for exactly who they are. A son who loves his parents with all his heart. A man loyal to his friends and family, but most of all to his values. Garrett and his lovely family, his wife Carrie and two sons Breck and Roman and their dog Phoenix, have all become clients and very dear friends of mine, and it is the highest honor to welcome Garrett to Boundless Body Radio. Welcome to the show.
I think it's Phoenix's favorite time. He just comes into the gym and does downward dog and gets in our way while we're trying to do exercises, but he gets so many pets. He's always there.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, he's really nailed the downward dog too. It's almost like really natural to him. Oh, man. Well, I do mean that this is going to be a very special episode for you. This is going to be the last day you can ever say that you weren't a guest on Boundless Body Radio. Have you fully contemplated that and taken that in?
I don't know if I ever will.
I just think the trajectory of the life of yourself and your family is just never going to really be the same after today. And I just, we see a lot of our guests turn to drugs and alcohol and all kinds of different things with the pressure. So I hope you're centered enough and ready for that.
Well, hopefully it'll be the right drugs. The problem with alcohol now is I drink it and I can't sleep. I went to the U2 concert at the Sphere, the opening night, drank, and then just stayed up all night, and then had a hangover the next day while I flew on 2 flights to get up to Canada. So I was like, the memories are great, but the pain was real.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes less and less worth it over time as we get older and older. It's not necessarily worth it.
Yeah, when I'm a kid, I didn't worry about whether I had a good night's sleep. When I was I remember in my early 20s, drinking a massive amount of tequila one night and doing a 7 a.m. appointment the next day, smelling like alcohol, but feeling fine. No big deal.
Yeah. Can't pull that off. Can't pull that off anymore.
I could just think about it and start being in pain.
Oh, man. Yeah, brutal.
I'm amazed that people are alcoholic because that's a real commitment. That's a real commitment to keep going every day.
Every day. Just power through. People have it, it's great.
I had a rough week. There's this Peroni beer sitting in my fridge. I'm like, that would be nice, but one beer, what's it going to do? And I don't ever want to drink because I'm not feeling great because it'll just probably make it worse.
Yep. No, absolutely. That's awesome. Well, today we're going to be talking about money. And for our listeners who are used to us talking about health and fitness, they might not think this is relevant, but I think the listener can probably relate to both you and I have had periods of time in our lives where we've had more money and we've had less money. And I can pretty much tell you there is a difference in your overall health if you don't have this sorted out. Would you agree?
Yeah, especially if you have uncertainty around cash flow. like when there's not consistent cash flow coming in, or you're not sure where the next, dollars are coming in, that could be a heavily concerning time that can disrupt your health, because it's more like a chronic stress that runs in the background on a regular basis. And so there's a lot of people that spend optimism. They have a good month, so they buy more things, and then the next month isn't quite as good, or something happens that is a change with their family, with their health, with their, you name it. And so it's a tricky thing, because like right now I could live in my other house that I lived in. It was a nice house, but we just had 2 telephone poles with transistors in the backyard, which is just, you can hear it buzzing. I don't think it's good for you.
It's not great
to be around electronic buzzing. Like, who knows what it's. And so we decided to move, and that move was really expensive because I didn't think about everything that would go into this new home, like getting it where we wanted it to be, and the furniture that we bring in, and the painting that we do, and the fixing of a roof, even though it was a new house in some ways. It was a refurbished like house, meaning like someone redid it. It was a contractor. And so like between that and then selling my business and deciding to do a comedy career and deciding to, write a book, and it just takes a lot of cash flow to do those types of things. And it had stressful moments through that, just a lot of change can be stressful. Selling a home, buying a home, selling a company, starting a new career, doing new things in that career you've never done before, going on a comedy tour, having people I love move away. That was a really stressful time in my life. And I did have my money figured out during that time overall. I had a lot of money coming in, but I was also spending a lot of it because it was coming in, and it was coming in from a licensing deal and part of the sale of my company. And so I found myself to be a little bit more reckless with it. Because, just always expecting to come in. And then all of a sudden, when I no longer want to be part of that company or make a transition, and that goes away, it just, money's a little bit more on my mind than normal. I've got money in the accounts. I've got, I'm kind of have years stashed away to handle things where some people are 3 to 6 months, but money scarcity is something that happens for everyone at some time, either because they're afraid that the way they made it wouldn't be sustainable, or they want to shift careers, or they have a health challenge, or they make major life changes. And ultimately, we aren't born with some type of money map or some type of money manual. And the ones we are given are pretty terrible, because they're usually written by institutions that want our money, not the people that want to help us really understand what it is. And people are really confused about what money is in the first place. There's just like, well, it's a scorecard, it's energy, it's, a concept, it's a construct, it's, a store of value. Like, we have all of these things, but ultimately, because of people's childhood traumas, because of the way that people don't process their emotions, because of the way that we stunt our growth, because we're immature in some areas, even though we might be very mature in other areas, I just find that our relationship to money is merely a reflection of the relationship we have to ourselves. And when we feel a lack of confidence or uncertainty, money starts to become part of that, lack of confidence and uncertainty. And sometimes people just go, I'll just work harder. Other times people go, I'll just save more money. It depends on kind of your money persona. But money's a tricky damn thing for so many of the population. They have money karma, they have money, stress, they have money misinformation, and they simply a lot of times just don't pay attention to it because they think it's complicated.
Yeah, very well said. And I would say for the listener that wants the more practical side of things, I would go back and listen to your, first big major books, Killing Sacred Cows and Disrupting Sacred Cows, because that will teach you a lot more of the concepts of like how this actually works, some things to do. You have some very interesting ideas in there that I really love. Money Unmasked was very different, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I really love the book. It'll probably surprise you to know that not only am I super good at counting, I can actually also read an entire book. I figured that would probably impress you quite a bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you read it, or is it, I guess it's not on audio, so you either read it or someone had to read it to you because it wasn't me.
let's just say I'm really excited for your children's book to be coming out early next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people will be able to read it, or at least look at the pictures and get a gist of what's going on.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to that. If there's colors and cute characters, would be great. But before we do, I do want to say that, like, having spent, the better part of a year with you and the family, I've gotten an inside look as to how Man, high performing, all of you guys are, especially you. You are so busy. I mean, I was over there 2 hours ago. You had already done your hour-long one-man show. You're doing it again later today. You've been dealing with tech issues. That's pretty frustrating. All kinds of appointments. You were on calls. You were a little bit late for our workout today as well. We started with Breck. To understand how high performing you are is pretty incredible. And to think that okay, this dude's 46. He's not slowing down. He seems to be getting healthier and healthier all the time. What are some of the health kind of principles that you have really grown to love and appreciate that help you to perform at the level that you want to professionally?
Man, it's not easy. Like when there's tech issues before a performance, it could be really draining and exhausting. And when, Mondays are my days where I just do all my business meetings, and a couple of those meetings are with attorneys, and I'm dealing with contracts that I normally used to have a partner that dealt with that kind of stuff. So when it lands on my plate, I feel like I'm really intelligent when it comes to certain things, and where I don't feel as intelligent. Like legalese is not my expertise, and definitely not Hollywood legalese. And so I've been, working on copywriting my comedy special and work on a deal for distribution. And it becomes taxing, between that and then also attorneys getting involved and messing with my clients in a way that's outside of their zone of genius and their boundaries, because they're starting to make financial advice and they're not financial advisors. It starts to wear me down. I like to have some days off, but because I took a longer period of time off to hunt, I took a longer period of time off to go to Burning Man, and I also launched a book at the same time. Those types of things really impact me. So how do I handle that? One is I was tired this morning, but I did get up and do the sauna, just 20 minutes, get a little sweat on. Then I take a cold shower and I get into the cold plunge. The cold plunge definitely wakes me up. I definitely dip my face in there when I feel like I'm lack of sleep or stress, that my face is more likely to be puffy because of the inflammation that comes with that stress. And I feel that helps me kind of release it. Then I do like 20 minutes of stretching. And so that's kind of my first hour of the day, is taking time to stretch. I'm in the cold plunge, and to distract myself, I'm answering YouTube comments, which this week have been overly negative. Like not a lot of people, just people that go watch like 10 videos and they're negative on every single one. And I'm like, yeah, it usually doesn't bother me at all. I laugh about it. I usually make fun of myself. But starting the day that way is helpful. And then writing, what am I grateful for? What's the intent of the day? And what are the things I want to reinforce that are most important to me, so I remember who I am and what I stand for and what's really going on. So starting the days that way could be, extraordinarily helpful. If I could just eat meat, then it would be fine. I'm just when I'm stressed, like yesterday, I ate so much candy. It was just a breakdown emotionally. After having the barometric pressure drop while I was in Toronto, all my sinus pressure went to the front of my face. I wanted to record some of my audiobook, but I sound stuffed up right now. So that kind of impacted me. I was in a lot of airports that had a lot of delays, and I had to end up sitting in middle seat on one of these planes. And these are privileged problems I get, but they just weigh down on my psyche. So I got to make sure, am I working out? I didn't quite eat properly. So what could I do to kind of deal with that? Well, intermittent fast, I'm going to get back on track. So today I had eggs and meat for breakfast, and what I'm finding is, what I would love to do is just go get some nicotine. I don't smoke, but you could take nicotine sprays. You could take, Hape. I feel myself wanting to go for that because of the unease and the pain. But then I just have to realize pain is part of the gift. It brings up the emotions that might be unprocessed. And ultimately, Casey, I felt a little bit sad this week. I feel best when I'm talking about these things, when I write about in Money Unmasked. But the thing is, I'm a human being that still has emotions and still has struggles, like coming home late on a Sunday, my energy was kind of depleted because I didn't have my normal routines where I might go for a walk with Carrie, or I might, get my workouts in with you 4 times during the week, or I get my sauna and my cold plunge, or get my stretches in. Sometimes being on the road disrupts that. Plus, I drank the one night when I was in Vegas, and that disrupted my sleep. And so there's kind of this compounded effect of selling a business and then having a small business that has big opportunity and trying to keep up with that. So how do I deal with it is maybe go outside and walk barefoot and get a little bit of grounding and earthing that way. Drink more water. Get more sleep if at all possible. I've been going to bed a little bit earlier, but I'm also waking up a little bit earlier, and I'm trying to get myself to go back to sleep or at least meditate. So I'm kind of working that, but it doesn't always cooperate, right? Movement. right? That stretching. I mean, it comes down to a lot of the basics that we've always learned all along. What we eat, what we drink, how much sleep we get, how much movement we have. And if we can just basically be out in the sun so we get some vitamin D, I'm thinking I have less vitamin D right now because I haven't been out in the sun. I haven't had my shirt off out in the sun because the weather's gone down and I'm not taking any vitamin D supplement. So it could be a compounded effect of all those things, but just because I write a book about money that has a lot to do about prosperity and feeling abundant doesn't mean that I don't have bouts of scarcity. That doesn't mean that I don't get off track. It's just I get on track a lot faster. Like in the past, I would be in these ebbs and flows where I would be in such a flow state for months at a time, being so crazy productive. And then I would finally hit a wall because I was pushing too hard, or I wasn't creating that depth and harmony where I was taking time for relaxation, rejuvenation, get up to my cabin because I'm trying to fit it all in. And that's kind of what happened after coming back from hunting is like from September 11th until today, I don't know that I've really had a day off. I am going to go to a concert on Saturday. I am going to take the day off with my wife and my sister and her husband on Sunday and just hang out at the cabin, which I think is much needed. But I find my old habits of being a striver where I think that work will solve all the problems. But if work leads to exhaustion or creates a deficiency in our health, or it starts to create like a level of grouchiness or disconnection because I don't feel like talking, which I normally like to talk things out. Like I just find myself at a place where I have to course correct. You either course correct or you get forced into corrections. Forced corrections are surgeries, they're health breakdowns, they're organ failure, they're loss of relationships. There's like fatigue that goes beyond where you just you start to lose a sense of hope. And so it has to be course correction along the way, which means creating a little bit of space, which means redefining timelines, which means recalculating priorities, which means designing a life that you don't want to retire from and examining the game that we're playing. And I'm saying in my game, what is it that I need to reduce and do less of? And part of it was just finding out what my flow is, how I create content. So it doesn't take as much time, but how do I do that and still create the same amount of quality? How do I change some of the timelines for my book launch so I'm not overly stressed and constrained that I don't have time to take off and hang out with my son or whatever it might be? So yeah, it's an interesting day to have this because you've kind of watched this. I missed a workout yesterday, which I don't know how often you think I miss a workout the day of.
Not very.
I can't think of another time, but it was just I had a meeting that went long. And by the time I got down there and I'm thinking about my next meeting I just wasn't in a place that I could handle. I couldn't be really present. And look, part of it is when you have a big vision, things get messy. I'm relying on independent contractors. I'm relying on other people keeping their word. And if it's more than what I can handle and be a steward over, then I have to look and re-examine, am I pushing the accelerator too hard? Am I expecting too much of other people? Am I being too nice and just lack of management? And I need to be firm and loving, but at the same time create better, parameters and guardrails. And so that's part of it. Is like sometimes I have to ask myself, why does it matter? Who really cares? Like, I think a lot of people, like I have a lot of knowledge to share, especially around this topic of money, and a lot of it's unique. I don't see it out there any other place. So there's a bit of stewardship there that also can feel like a burden, but I have to also recognize it's my job to live a great life first and foremost. It's my job to take care of my family first and foremost. And then I could bring that information to the world. But if I skip the step of taking care of myself and my health, and I skip the step of my family, then what ends up showing up in my life is guilt and shame. And guilt and shame is a burden that weighs down energy and doesn't allow me to be fully expressed. And then everything feels like effort. And I think a lot of people are forcing themselves and feel like they're an effort because that's what society wants them to believe. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. Sacrifice today because one day it'll all be better. Live a crappy life because one day you'll get to retire. This guy that's fighting with me on YouTube, like, I don't even know who he is. He's retired at 55. Like, that's not an inspiring life. Great, you're retired at 55. You have a long life to live and you're just done with value creation. Like, you can't find a purpose that serves other people and solves problems and adds value. Like, we just don't share the values. So let him live his life the way he lives it, but also examine my life and say, what do I have to change and course correct so it doesn't become a bigger problem long term?
Yeah, so I think that's really important. Like I always say, like for all the vegans that make comments on my posts and stuff, like I would not take 5 seconds out of my life to go say something negative about them or whatever they're doing in the same way. And you're talking about you really have to preserve yourself to be able to give the most of yourself. And I think you set a good example yesterday by walking into the workout room and saying, you know what, today's not the right day for it. Today is a day where I need to go focus on other things. I need to rest and relax. And having a hard workout is not necessarily the best thing when you have those kinds of conditions. And so I appreciate that. And I wish more people would realize that, you know, you're heading into a workout, have an A workout and a B workout, and understand that there might be a day where you should focus more on mobility or core work or do something that's lighter and not quite as stressful. And I do have one more lifestyle question for you. You mentioned something earlier, the meat and the eggs. I know over the years you've had several kind of forays into animal-based and carnivore diets. What have you thought about, you know, kind of similar to what you do in the financial world with working with unconventional ideas with nutrition, doing something that it seems very unconventional? What has your experience been with that?
Look, I've been a very curious person that always questions everything. Not because I'm a skeptic, but because I want to know how things work and how effective they are and how it came to be. And I learned this really from being indoctrinated as a kid of how things were by going to school. Like, here's an indoctrination. America's the best, America, right? Like, and then I went to Korea and I was like, wait, these people are just as free as we are in South Korea, and they're very nice people. Like, so I do think America's an amazing place. Like, I think I'm really glad that I live here. But at the same time, like, I started to question, because I went to this movie in Korea and they showed this thing called aircon disease, where this woman was using the air conditioner and then she got really sick. And when she turned it off and used the fan, then she wasn't sick anymore. But there were rolling blackouts because they were having energy issues. So was it really that people are getting sick from using an air conditioner, or was it they wanted people to reduce their energy usage, and fear was the way that they wanted to do it? And so I thought, well, where are we being told this? Like, for the first time, right? So I came home and I just didn't take anything at face value. I was going to school and I was like, I think that we lead better lives the better questions we ask. And I have a mentor that just got pancreatic cancer. They wanted to do chemo. He said no, left the hospital, even though they were advising him against it. And his numbers are now normal 2 months later. I just saw him in Dallas. It was super heavy, but he did other methodologies and, you know, really asked so many questions. And the medical establishment, the people he talked to were mad he was asking the questions. He's like, wait, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trained to ask questions. And so I just have asked a lot of questions over the years about how things work and what would prevent them from working and why they are the way they are. And it's very inconvenient for people, especially, you know, in money, because when you ask and you learn, you find out that it's not what it seems. And look, some of the news was bad news for me. Casey, if I could just sell 401ks and get paid an asset under management fee for those 401ks, I would be worth tens of millions of dollars more today than I am. But when I realized it was deferring tax, not saving tax, when I realized that there were fees that were impacting the return substantially, when I realized that taxes could go up in the future and people are delaying their taxes so they could end up in an adverse tax situation, when I realized there's no cash flow with these plans and the tax savings that they think they have it isn't in their pocket, it's deferred in the plan they eventually have to pay tax on, I started to be like, wow, this isn't what it was supposed to be. And yet 75 million Americans rely on that as part of their retirement plan. And then I started saying, well, why are we retiring? And I'm like, well, the industrial age, people had terrible jobs. Retirement was needed because people were working 7 days a week in assembly lines, and it was exhausting and it was breaking their body down, and they would retire and then they would only live for a couple of years because they had such a terrible life. We've had advancements in technology. We've moved to a more informational age and a more technological age, and yet we're still abiding by these old antiquated concepts. And unfortunately, as you know, people are living longer today, but sicker and longer, dependent upon pills to keep them alive, dependent upon help from other people because they're not healthy and vital, their vitality's low. And yet they're going to live their so-called golden ages by doing the things they never did while they were growing up or while they were at work, because that's when it's supposed to get better. So I just started to ask questions. It wasn't like I wanted these answers. It wasn't like I arrived to an answer and then I said, how do I design a plan that supports and validates my process? Because that wasn't the case. There's just much easier ways to make money than how I make money. It's harder to write a book and make money from writing a book than selling a financial product. And my wife used to say, too bad you couldn't just stick to selling insurance where there were renewals and it was easy for you to do, but I was also bored. So now I'm moving into is there a way to still be an intellectual property capitalist and be able to have organizations that I can get paid when people actually get services done the proper way. And so I'm just playing a different game now because it would help for recurring revenue and it would help to make sure it's designed properly. And as long as I don't hit bandwidth or too much, capacity issues, I'm just looking at it's all or nothing. I either do this or I do that. It's like, well, what do people really look for? What do they really need? So the answer to your question, which you asked forever ago, was really curiosity is the key. And asking questions is a gateway to really understanding things. And when we look at the traditional methods, when I learned the food pyramid in college, I was like, really? The food pyramid? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And asking questions, but there was the indoctrination of this is what we've always been taught. Okay, low fat, high carb, low fat, right? So no fats for the brains, not any good fats. We're just calling all fats fats, and it's the tiny amount to have. Just fruits and vegetables, a whole bunch of carbs, and a little bit of protein. Like, that food pyramid has been dismantled and shown that it was erroneous. So when I started reading Rob Wolf's work, and I was like, wow, paleo makes a lot of sense. It worked for me in my life in most ways. Where it didn't, my wife said I was boring. She's like, you know what? I hate going to a restaurant. You're asking tons of questions. You're the obnoxious asshole that can't just accept the food. You want to know what everything's cooked in and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I think the body's resilient enough that I don't need to be that strict every single moment. And she also said I looked in the mirror too much, was getting too vain, and she doesn't really care, as you know, about that kind of stuff. She just wants me to be healthy. But there's a level of stress that comes with trying to be perfect. And unfortunately, the way that fitness has worked is that people go and they do their strip down where they're eating chicken and broccoli and they're only drinking water and they're working out multiple times and they do all this stuff to look shredded with their veins popping. And then they post pictures of that as if that's how they look every day. But then they go back to their normal life. Then we live up to this impossible standard and we don't choose to be fully happy about who we are because we don't look like that projected image that might even be photoshopped, that might be, bronze tanner that's involved in it, whatever it might be, because we think that that's what it takes to be loved. And sometimes it's just us loving ourselves for who we are. I still judge myself and my body, and when I'm more healthy versus less healthy, I see pictures when I was on carnivore versus now. I start to get in this comparison game. And the reality is I'm probably the only one that really cares. And it probably really doesn't matter all that much. But because somewhere along the line I thought it did, from the time I was a kid, and I saw people respect it or admire it or talk about it or be attracted to it, I said from the time I was a kid, I always want to make sure I take care of myself. But what take care of myself came from a rudimentary place in a very early developed brain that then becomes a permanent image that's impossible as like an Adonis complex. Like, I've never gotten to the point where I'm that shredded because it was so boring. It is so tedious. And I'm not a fitness instructor, and I'm not posting pictures. Look at me. I once got shredded in 2012. I put the pictures out online, and my wife was like, "What is this about? This isn't like a turn on to me." And then she's looking at the comments, being like, "Is this really what you want to put out there?" So that's the thing is we have a lot of antiquated systems. We have a lot of antiquated beliefs, and we have to look at who's profiting from those beliefs and why there's people that are so avid to speak against anything you do, that their way is the best way to do it. And look, I think that there are some variances in blood type that can impact maybe what your food is and food intake and all that kind of stuff. But what I know for me and for my son Breck is the more meat we eat and the less carbs we have, and even as strange as it is, I always thought that the one thing everybody could agree on was vegetables. But now you're telling me the vegetables are evil and they're destroying the body or whatever. I'm just kidding. But I think we have to kind of look at the trial and error and also what works for our lifestyle,
I love that. Thank you for that foray. I love that answer. So let's talk about your book. And I want to tee this up by saying that recently I invested in an immersive experience with you. I got to go up to your cabin and spend some time talking finances. You gave me this book several months ago, and all of this has really surprised me. The book itself is not what I was expecting about a book that's about money and finances. And
maybe because I'm an asshole and you kind of figured like, wow, this seems like a genuinely nice person writing this book.
Probably. Yeah, exactly. But I remember sitting down with you up at your cabin, and I know again you're unconventional, and I didn't know whether we'd be discussing finances or investments, what I should spend my money on and what I shouldn't. And the first question out of your mouth was, "What is your first childhood memory of money?" And that took me back, dude. I knew I didn't know exactly what to expect, but I wasn't expecting that as a question. Why did you ask that as the very first thing that you said to me that day?
Look, when I wrote Killing Sacred Cows, I had no idea where scarcity came from. I thought maybe it was like passed down through stories, which that is part of it. And even passed down through behaviors, which that might be part of it. But I really think a lot of our scarcity and our belief around money happens at a very early age, which is from our first memories of it. Was it a good memory? Was it a bad memory? Was it one that was scary? Was it one that was hurtful? Was it one that, we were told there's not enough, we can't afford it, like you're greedy, like whatever it is, when our mind hasn't even been developed, when we don't know how to deal with that information. And so based upon what I knew about you and how you felt about dealing with money and addressing money and tackling all that, I thought that there might be something that you could glean from going back to that early memory and find out, was it a positive or negative memory, or was it just simply like, what was your reaction to that thinking? And was it strong enough that you'd still remember it today? And so, I mean, if we go into the childhood work, we could find out where the stem of our belief systems are that serve us or harm us.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that the first memory that came up was me stealing from my parents to buy candy. Of course, that's going to have some impact in my life and affect the way that I think about money. Your book illuminated lots of different principles, which reframed a lot of things for me. Can you talk about the win then play and the way you look at different games?
Look, man, this is a tough game in life because there's forces that work against our natural flow. And those forces come from societal norms. Society would have you believe, and look, even probably your parents or grandparents would have you believe, the more educated you are in the system, the more valuable you are to society. We still see, even though it's happening less and less, that to be a doctor or to be a lawyer means that you've made it, means that you are prestigious. We're starting to watch that break down in society because of results and because of insurance plans and because of the state of health of people. But this indoctrination is, the more we learn in books, the more smarter we are. But the problem is sometimes we just become really good at taking tests. And yes, we learn about all these topics in a very general sense. And yet the way that learning is happening now is changed because of the internet and because of, the early days of AI. And so what happens is people end up around money and around, these games going, I need to check the boxes that society tells me is important. The size of my house, the type of car that I drive, the degrees that I have, the how nice the stuff I have in the house is, the clothes that I wear. There's all these check boxes society continually tries to get us to buy into. The keeping up with the Joneses, from what we see in Hollywood to what we watch on commercials to what we read about. It's this indoctrination of what societal norm is, and that our value is in our materials and our value is in our degrees, all these things external to us. Our winning game says, what if we ignore all that and we look at what fulfills us? What do we really want if you strip all that away? If we said it didn't matter how we looked, what we drove, where we lived, but it was simply about what really brings us joy. And most people see that as frivolous. That's what kids do. They think about things that are exciting and they dream big and they want to be astronauts or whatever it might be. That's kids' play. Now it's time to be an adult in the real world. Are you going to check these boxes and go up this ladder? And that's either playing not to lose because we're holding on to what we got, or playing to win because we're chasing something we don't have. Both forms of scarcity. But if we could say, what if we design a game worth playing? What if we design a life worth living? What if we design the life we don't want to retire from? And that game is something that we enjoy the process along the way, enjoy life along the way. Then we've actually found win in the work, not just in the outcome. Society wants you to get to outcomes. And once you have that outcome, you're valuable. Once you have that outcome, you're validated. I want you to get to the place where the work is the validation, because it's work that you enjoy, that you grow in, that you want to do for long periods of time, you're not trying to get rid of, and that it's worth the difficulty, because work sometimes is difficult. Developing a skill set to write a book, developing a skill set to do comedy, developing a skill set to be articulate, that requires reps, that requires work, that requires coaching, that requires taking a leap on ourselves. Society wants you to leap into their arms and they're going to let you down. You got to leap into yourself and say, do you trust yourself to know what you truly want? Not what well-intentioned preachers, teachers, family, and friends think you should walk. Not the box society created for you, which is more, bigger, better, faster. But where you say, this is how I want my days to go. This is how I want to invest in myself. This is the lifestyle I want to build now and in the future, not just one day, someday. And here's the work that's worth doing. That's the winning game. And I'm saying once you design the winning game, you already won, because the game is the win, because you're playing at a level and in something that's fulfilling along the way. And it's worthwhile. So even when there's minutia, even when there's obstacles, you still move forward because your vision is bigger than the obstacle, because your vision is your win. And then value is how you deliver that vision. And then prosperity becomes kind of your state of being. And so vision is the win, value is the way, prosperity becomes your way of being, and dollars are the byproduct of that value.
Yeah, perfectly said. And this is why it's so important to actually do the work that seems so crazy difficult in the beginning, doing the work of finding your soul purpose, which you write about quite a bit, SOUL, soul purpose. And I find it really interesting that most of us probably would rather get locked into some career, like you said, being a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever it is. It's almost like that is easier than it is to take the time and energy to sit down and discover what our soul purpose actually is. Have you found that to be the case with many of the people that you work with?
Look, soul purpose is something to be remembered. And what society wants us to think is something that we have to get to, that we have to do more work, get more indoctrinated, listen to another podcast, read another book, go to another event, go to school, have someone tell you. But like, it's all something that we have to be in silence enough to ask ourselves. We have to find a hobby where we lose track of time. We have to maybe meditate or do some writing or something, or go up in the woods and contemplate. People aren't comfortable being alone because we're addicted to the noise. The noise distracts us from our purpose. It hides our purpose. It buries it deep down because our purpose might be inconvenient. It might be scary. We might not know how to achieve it. But our soul purpose is who we are when we're at our very best, fully self-expressed. Not convenient to be like, I'm going to do comedy. Not convenient to say, I'm going to do a theatrical keynote. Not convenient to say, I want to write a children's book. These were all things that required co-creation and collaboration. It required coaching and developing skill sets. I didn't walk out one day and it was all there. It was something that was developed over time. And for most people, that's a scary notion because they don't want to suck at something in order to get good. And so the first time I tried to act, it was awful. It was atrocious. It was terrible. And it was uncomfortable. But it's gotten better. My performance today was probably the better acting I've done, and so it's getting a lot more fun. There's a lot more dimensions to it. But we have to remember our soul purpose. I feel like it was born within us, but then we think it's outside of us. So we're chasing all of this stuff to try to find it. And a lot of that chasing is helpful because it's a road to don't. What don't you want? What don't you want to do? What's not working for you, right? That's the key.
Yeah, Mark Manson writes about that a little bit in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Like, he wanted to be a rock star. Of course, wanted to be a rock star. But did he want to actually practice and go do a bunch of shitty gigs at weird times over the weekends? Like, no, he didn't want to put in the work to do that. So he learned the things that he didn't want to end up finding the things that he truly wanted and was very good at. So I love that explanation. Yeah. Another thing that you do in your book very well is talk about your money personas. And I would recommend to the listener, definitely go to your website, Garrett's website, and go take the quiz. To my dismay, I learned that I was a miser. We can attack this anyway.
People don't love getting that one back.
I didn't love that. I didn't love that one. I wasn't totally surprised, I have to say, but yeah, I didn't exactly love that one. I know you've had periods of time in your life, like you write about, where you kind of found yourself in that same spot. And we don't have to go over all of them, but I love the way that you show what the persona is, and then we flip the script in this really interesting way that just works with how you already are. Let's just use those skills to help you succeed rather than say, you suck at this and you're never going to be any good unless you do all these different steps. It's like, no, let's work with how you are so that you can improve.
Yeah. People are in death by committee. Hey, tell me what to do. Is this the right thing? I don't want to make a mistake. Is everyone going to accept this? Is everyone going to like this? And we spend so much time and energy trying to avoid mistakes. But mistakes are part of the process. Mistakes are part of the ingredients. It's part of how we learn. And if we spend so much time in angst trying to avoid it, we never really discover who we are. Like, if you're going to do something extraordinary, there's going to be missteps. but that's going to be part of the ingredients that creates the attention to new details, that creates the harvesting of a new lesson that you can now articulate, that creates the bandwidth to then know how to do it different, right? So I just think that so many people they don't want to be defined by their mistakes, but they're defined by their fear of their mistakes. Mm. I mean, we're human. To be human is to err, right? You know, that's a bad paraphrase of Shakespeare, you know, and yet we hide from our mistakes. We pretend that we don't make them, and people feel that. I feel like the people that are most admired in today's world are the most vulnerable, and they make mistakes and they own up to it and they acknowledge it. And the people who are trying to pretend like they've got everything figured out in every area of life, we know you don't. That's just not how it goes. You know, you might be so superior in some areas and have a genius level there, and then in other areas be so lopsided. You know, I remember watching on a flight this documentary of Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, his wife was sick, and she's like, bring me something to throw up in. And he brought her a colander, right? So there's holes in it. Like, she's like, what are you doing? That's going to go everywhere. So he put a cookie sheet under it. Like, he just was so inept at like that area. And even in his relationship with his wife, right? She's like, he's a nice person, caring, but what he's really good at is allocating capital. And he's been really focused at allocating capital. And just because he's really good at that and has a lot of money doesn't mean that he's good at these other areas. Right? I mean, we already know he supports Bill Gates, who's a total prick. You know, it doesn't take long to find that out. If you read just a couple things at the atrocities he's done on humanity in the name of philanthropy, right? So the thing is, like, we're going to make errors, we're going to make mistakes, and we just have to be willing to take steps forward and course correct. And the sooner that we can acknowledge it and have a few people that have our back that we could talk about it when we feel stuck or we get in a looping pattern, then we can get out of that sooner and learn the lesson versus try to hold it in and pretend, which just destroys energy. And people can it's like a stench that comes on you of scarcity as you try to pretend like everything's fine. You know, sometimes people ask how you're doing and they don't really want to know. Like this week when people are like, how you doing? I'm like, I've had better weeks, man. It's been a difficult one for sure. You know, it's just, I've been pretty open about it, but it helps rather than pretending.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I can say about you've caught me off guard a few times by asking me how I was doing. And I give you the standard answer, but I realize you're really asking me the question. Like, I need to be more forthright with you, because when you ask, you are asking me how I'm doing, and you're not just looking for like, oh, I'm good, which is normally what I give you anyway. So I love that you took that there. I also love in the book where you write about the exchange between time and money and trying to understand the what I call the E word, enough. It's such a struggle to understand when we've had enough and how to understand the balance between time and money. How would you talk to somebody that maybe will tell you like, yeah, I love all these concepts. I would love to be an entrepreneur. I'd love to start a side gig, but I already have this full-time job. I've got student debt to pay. I don't have the time. How do you help people understand that relationship between time and money?
We have a few excuses in life. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have the ability. All three of those excuses come when we try to do everything on our own. When we try to do too much by ourselves, we have constraint in those three areas. Part of it is a lot of us have the time, but we get really caught up in escapisms. My escapism is going to be I start watching some TV series late at night, or I start picking up the house and fix stuff that didn't matter, but I need to have that done in order to do the next thing, right? Like we find those escapisms that start to infringe upon our time, or we're just not strategic with our time, and we say yes to everyone as a people pleaser, that it infringes on our time, or we have too many things on our phone that are, anyone's, to-do list that comes into our inboxes. And so it's reclaiming your life and creating boundaries. It's tough because when people create really clear boundaries, they can seem calloused at times. You might even judge them, but the reality is they just know what they're up to, and somehow we're trying to project our agenda onto them. So you got to ask, is this worth my time? Is this representative of who I want to be and what I want to do and where I want to go? And don't let the world dictate that, but start to use your own force to clear a calendar to be consistent with who you are. And when we start to identify that properly, we recover time. We transcend time, because even doing a morning ritual, or even when you work out, the rest of the day is going to be more productive, even though you have less time. Each minute matters more because of the energy and the way that you show up with that. When you're overwhelmed, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm distracted, little things seem bigger than they are. I start spending more time worrying about what needs to get done than actually getting it done. That's what fatigue will do to us. That's what saying yes too often will do. And so, sometimes it's just saying not now, or I don't have bandwidth, or getting clear about what really matters and getting focused. So that's not easy for people to do, because we want to be liked. And the more we want to be liked, the more we overcommit. The more we overcommit, the less health we have. The less health we have, the less energy there is. The less energy we have, the less bandwidth we have, the less clarity we have, the less energy for vision, the less quality of life, the less, it's a spiral. And most people are caught in that spiral, just trying to do things for other people while they sit silently and secretly resent them for saying yes. But they could have said no, and they just chose not to.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your morning routine, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. You talked about writing, and you do many forms of writing. And I think one of the forms that you do is the 5-minute journal, I believe. And that is a very simple, quick thing that you could do to start to establish those boundaries. Anybody can find 5 minutes in the morning. Can you tell us exactly what you write in that journal?
Yeah, I start with, what are the 3 things I'm most grateful for? Then the second 3 is, what are my intentions for the day? And then the next piece are, what are my belief systems I want to reinforce that are most important as my operating system? And then I review, before I do those 3 things. Some people they say that you should do, what's the 3 best parts of your day and 1 thing you learned before you go to bed. I just do it first thing in the morning. 3 things that happened the day before, and then 1 thing that I can just say, oh, this is what I learned. And then I go right into the 3, 3, and 3, or the 3, 3, and then all the reaffirmations, or whatever you might call them. And it's just the format of the journal. And I do that the second I sit in the sauna before it warms up. So now the sauna is warming up while I hurry and write that, and I'm just starting to sweat when I finish it. So I just throw it outside the sauna, and then I get my sweat on. And then at that time, I'm usually, while I'm sitting in the sauna, I just clear stuff off my plate. YouTube comments, email, text messages, so that I kind of start the day where that's all out of the way, and then get the cold plunge. So my morning ritual has ebbs and flows. There's times where I'm meditating and I'm listening to spiritual talks, and I'm really taking time to write just for myself, to process my emotions. What have I not accepted? What have I not forgiven? What have I not chosen to love? That's in my energy field, right? And I'll write so I can process that. What am I judging or hating or shunning or projecting? And then I'll write that down, and I'll work on that same process. And then, what's the truth of who I am, and who, what is the truth of at the core of all this? And then what did I learn from my meditation, and what am I committed to for the day? That's, if I have a longer morning, or I'm that's what I really am committed to tomorrow morning, since I'm kind of in a place where I'm less than 100% right now, where I feel a bit of heaviness, where I feel a little fatigue, where I feel a little bit out of sorts and not quite in flow, because there's that sense of overwhelm.
Yeah, it occurred to me as you were talking about boundaries and setting that up, that would be a good small way that people could start with that. I'm willing to bet that the YouTube guy leaving you all these comments is probably going to make it in the journal at some point this week.
Yeah, I get it. He's not really at the same level financially that I am, and my knowledge. So I really normally would just let it go, and but he's commenting on 10 videos, and I was finally either debate me or move on. And he said, we'll just film a video about it. I'm like, great, I'm going to film a video about it, because it's not worth my time. But I probably, you're right, wouldn't have engaged at the level I did had I not just been annoyed about other stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I love that. And that is a great segue into what I want to talk about next with your book. And it's really interesting to see a book written about money where the closing chapters are literally about love. How are you able to work that in? I think that is so super powerful.
Because the reason we chase money is because we're chasing love anyway. Because when it all comes down to, it's the most abundant resource on the planet. It's what people really want deep down, but we've heard too many rappers say that love and money are the same thing, or if you have money, then you get all the free love that you want, right? And all this kind of stuff. But I think it was Coco Chanel that said the best things in life are free, but the second best things are very, very expensive. And to me, that's a quote about love. Like, it's about love. And then outside of that, then it's about, luxuries. And, like, it would be great to fly private, and it's great to go to Michelin three-star restaurants. And it's great to, have the most luxurious beds and bedding and housing. Like, but that first thing is, as I think the question we all ask is, am I lovable? And we do all these actions trying to prove that we're lovable. And money becomes one of those false gods that we try to use to prove that we're lovable and valuable, but actually a lot of times pushes people away because it feels inauthentic, or it feels showy, or it feels like we're more concerned about showing them how valuable we are rather than seeing them for who they are. And when we haven't accepted ourselves, then we use money as our way to like amplify what we hope people will see in us. And it actually becomes a blinder where it doesn't help us at being present, because it's a great companion. It's a great byproduct of value. It's just a terrible solo artist or a replacement for value. Because when it becomes a replacement for value, then it's about deception and coercion.
Yeah. Well,
so
sorry.
In the end, it is all about love when it comes down to it. And why aren't more books talking about that around money? That's like the real issue here.
Take us inside the car when you were taking a drive with your wife. This story is super powerful and very gutting, and I think it really relates to what you're talking about now about love. It was a time in your life when you were very successful and a great businessman, and so many good things going for you, but there was a conversation that was had inside of a car that I find to be, again, very gutting, but very powerful.
Yeah, and like we have our excuses. Like I notice that when there's the most difficult things in my life, I want to be able to point out, but guess what? The real estate market was bad, or this thing happened with this client, or, I didn't know this was going to happen. Like we like to blame because it's hard to take responsibility. And at the time I wanted to blame that my partners had died. And that's why I was making these rational decisions of overworking and neglecting my family, because I felt like it was a justifiable excuse. But the thing is, it was at the expense of everything that mattered. And so my wife was just like, hey, you're an extraordinary businessman and an ordinary husband and father. Like just straight up says it to me, right? And she was right. So I couldn't really argue, and I got emotional. And I remember, not really knowing what to say. But what I had to do was not say anything and just take the action of working from home for the next 30 days, investing the time with her and my son, taking care of my health, taking time to sleep and recharge, showing that I was a valuable asset, not just do everything for everyone else, because a lot of other people were grieving and I was just picking up the slack, and I was picking up the slack of partners that weren't there without processes and systems. And I was thinking I was doing the noble good deed. But the reality was my partners never asked me to do that. And they wouldn't have wanted me to do that at the expense of my own health and my own family. But it took a moment like that to bring that to reality. It took someone holding up a mirror to me and saying, do you like what you see? Is this what you really want? Because let me tell you what it's like on our side. And so that really was a change in course, a change in trajectory for me. And I found my energy changed, my level of excitement changed, my health changed. I got back to being active. There was just a whole lot that came from that courage that she had to have that conversation with me.
How proud are you now that I can tell you that every time we do a workout with you, the family, all I see is love. Like the number of times you guys are teasing each other and kicking each other and pushing each other, but also embracing, saying positive, encouraging things. It's pure love, dude. I notice it. It's very, very palpable. How proud does that make you?
I mean, you can make mistakes and you can, but you can course correct. And I'm really close to my oldest who's in there. He asked me about his form as much as he asked you. And I always tell him to ask you, but like the first few days, he was always like trying to be perfect and didn't like when I brought it up to him. So that's really cool. And I see him tease Carrie just how I do. And I see him hug her just like, I'm always hugging her. And, we're just, it definitely is a nice way to invest time together as we get healthier. And there is a lot of love in our family for sure. And I feel like that's something that Carrie and I really led with. And, you know, we do tease each other a lot, which is healthy because I tease the ones I love, you know?
Yep. Yeah, it's not feigned. I can tell you that. It's very genuine. And I really appreciate that. Tell us what you have coming up in the future.
Children's book, hitting it hard to get the Money Unmasked book out there in the world right now. Halloween party with the family coming up. I moved my flight so I could be back in time for it. Some time at the cabin with my wife and sister and her husband, going to a Zach Brown band concert, meeting with my co-author of What Would the Rockefellers Do and recreating business together, which we haven't done for years because of my relationship with Well Factory and that being over and that opening up this possibility again. Having a 2-day at my house, which I've never done, for financial advisors to teach them all that I knew in marketing and how to create intellectual property. So yeah, it's a big year. Sometimes I forget how great some of the things I've done are. Like Money Unmasked, I'm proud of, man. It's a piece of my heart, and I feel like I think it's really making an impact already. Like hearing about some of the reviewers, I think I was joking with you. I got a 4-star review, but it was 5-star like material. She was like, I'm going to read this book again and again. It's the first financial book I ever connected with. And I'm like, sounds like 5 to me, but you know, this is the perfectionist in me. And it's fine because I would rather have a 4-star with all that content there than not have the review, you know?
Yeah, that's funny. My favorite review I ever got was a 1-star. We don't get many on the show, but I got a 1-star that said the host's voice is terrible and he talks too fast. It's terrible, but the content is really great and the guests are awesome. It's like that's at least worth like 3. Like, come on, like 1. Give me a break.
I shouldn't have put it. I apologize that I went on there and did that.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll forgive you. I work for you, so what choice do I have, right? Real quick before we let you go, tell us a little bit more about the children's book and what message you're trying to send.
That they are their greatest asset, and that the amount of money they have is nothing about the amount of value that they could provide, and that money's really helpful to be happy about your basics, but it can't make you happier just because you have more of it once the basics are handled. It can, however, allow you to invest in yourself and then share your gifts when you get to an abundant place, that you don't just have to hoard it, but you could be in thriving in abundance and improve other people's lives along the way too. So I think it's a pretty special message, and I think even the adults that read it will get a lot from it.
That's amazing. Definitely a book I should have had as a child, but I'm looking forward to reading it now because it seems like it has way less words than the last one that you wrote, Money Unmasked.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you read the other one. That's great.
Good. Garrett, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed our time together and enjoyed our time together this afternoon. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
GarrettGunderson.com, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Garrett.live in any internet browser, or /Garrett Gunderson TV when you're on YouTube. We'll take you there as well. I have a blog because I like writing. I haven't been writing as much with the book coming out right now, but usually that's 2 to 4 blogs a week. Some ladies like, I've read every blog. They're very long. Yes, they take 10 to 20 minutes to read. I put the full amount that I possibly can out there, right? So yeah.
Awesome. We will be sure to link those in the notes, and I can confirm that those blogs are also very long. And I have read some of those too, so I'm not so bad.
Easy to do it, you can do it, you know?
That's amazing. Garrett Gunderson, again, thank you so very much. It's been an honor to work with you and the family, and it's been an honor to host you here today. I hope you can control your life after this gets released with all the fandom and everything that's going to go down. But I think I'll
try not to let it go to my head, dude.
I think you'll do okay. So thank you very much for being on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, man.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. I know I say this all the time, but I really do mean it. It has been such a joy to make and produce this podcast and to watch it grow. Our business started in the pandemic in July of 2020, and we started the podcast in October of 2020. So it has been 3 years now, and to see that we have generated over 400,000 downloads worldwide is just simply unbelievable to me. This year in particular has been such a blast to travel to different health conferences and not only meet some of our amazing guests, but also to meet many of you, our listeners and supporters. We really just can't thank you enough. As always, feel free to book a complimentary 30-minute session on our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. On our homepage, there is a Book Now button where you can find a time to speak with us about health, fitness, nutrition, whatever you like. We've loved chatting with people all over the world and many of you out there to bounce ideas off each other or to try to come up with plans to achieve specific goals, or even if it's just to reach out to introduce yourselves, we would just love to meet you and connect with you there. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch these full interviews, and also the shorter interviews on more specific topics that are taken from these full interviews. We've gotten really good feedback over there. It's also a really fun way to interact with people who comment. We read and reply to every single YouTube comment we get, so head on over there if you want to start a conversation and watch these videos. As always, if you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. It really is the best way to make sure this podcast gets out there to more listeners. We've been able to keep Boundless Body Radio ad-free for 3 years and really want to continue to do so. And so your 5-star ratings and reviews are the best way to support us at Boundless Body and support the podcast. Cheers. Thank you again so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio.